I don't understand, I said, my voice echoing in the sterile, overly decorated living room. The tuition is due next week. I thought we had a plan. My parents, Margaret and George Carter, exchanged a look. It was a look I'd seen countless times before, a look that said, "Here we go again, Lucas being difficult." Ethan, my brother, the golden child, the prodigy, sat on the plush sofa, scrolling through his phone, utterly disinterested in the unfolding drama. He already knew. He always knew. "Lucas, we've talked about this," my mother said, her voice tight with a forced patience that never quite masked her underlying annoyance. "Ethan's opportunity is unique. He needs our support." Ethan's opportunity was a prestigious internship at a top law firm in New York City. An unpaid internship, of course, which meant my parents were footing the bill for his apartment, his living expenses, his everything. "And what about my opportunity?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation. "I got into state, Mom. I worked my ass off for that acceptance. I have a scholarship, but it doesn't cover everything. State University wasn't Harvard, it wasn't Yale, it wasn't the Ivy League pedigree my parents craved. But it was a good school, a great school, and I'd earned my place there. I'd dreamed of studying engineering, of building things, of creating something meaningful." My father sighed, a heavy, world-weary sound. "Lucas, be reasonable. Ethan's future is brighter. He has the potential to really make something of himself. You'll figure something out." "Figure something out?" I repeated, my voice rising in disbelief. "I had it figured out. I had a plan. You promised you'd help me." "We never promised anything, Lucas," my mother said, her voice sharp. "We said we'd try, and we are. We're trying to support Ethan. He needs our help now." Ethan finally looked up from his phone, a smug, self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. "Don't be such a drama queen, Lucas," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "It's not the end of the world. You can always go to community college." Community college. The ultimate insult. The place where dreams went to die, according to my parents. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You're just giving up on me? You're choosing him again?" My father stood up, his face a mask of cold indifference. "Lucas, we've made our decision. We're not going to discuss this any further. You're 20 years old. It's time you started taking responsibility for your own life." "Responsibility," I echoed, my voice cracking. "I've always taken responsibility. I've worked hard. I've gotten good grades. I've done everything you've ever asked of me. And for what? To be treated like I don't even matter?" My mother walked over to me, her hand outstretched, as if to offer comfort. But her touch was cold, her eyes devoid of any warmth. "Don't be so dramatic, Lucas," she said, her voice laced with a chilling detachment. "You'll be fine. You're a smart boy. You'll figure it out." And then, the final blow. My father, his voice devoid of any emotion, delivered the sentence that would shatter my world. "We're going to need you to move out, Lucas," he said. "We need the spare room for Ethan's things. He'll be home for the summer, you know, before he leaves for New York." They were kicking me out, disowning me, abandoning me, all to support the golden child, the son they actually cared about. I stared at them, my mind reeling, my heart breaking. I'd always known deep down that I was second best, an afterthought, a disappointment. But I'd never expected this level of cruelty, of betrayal, of indifference. "Fine," I said, my voice a low, trembling whisper. "I'll go." I turned and walked out of the house, out of my childhood home, out of the life I'd known. I didn't pack a bag, didn't take anything with me, I just left. As I walked away, I didn't look back. I didn't want to see their faces, their smug satisfaction, their utter lack of remorse. I was alone, utterly and completely alone. Broke, homeless, abandoned by the people who were supposed to love me, to protect me, to care. "They don't care about you, Lucas," a voice whispered in my head, a bitter, cynical voice that I recognized as my own. "You were never anything more than a burden to them, a disappointment, a shadow of your brother." I walked for hours, my feet numb, my mind racing. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. My future, my dreams, my hopes, they were all gone, shattered like a dropped glass. I was nothing, a forgotten son, an outcast, a failure, and for the first time in my life, I felt utterly, hopelessly lost. The city was a cold, uncaring beast, indifferent to my pain, my despair. I wandered the streets, a ghost in the urban landscape, invisible to the bustling crowds, the oblivious pedestrians, the couples laughing and holding hands. I had a few dollars in my pocket, enough for a cheap meal, maybe a bus ticket to somewhere. But where? I had no destination, no plan, no hope. I tried calling my friends, the people I'd thought were my friends, but the calls went straight to voicemail or were met with awkward excuses, polite brush-offs. "Hey, Lucas, sorry man, I'm really busy tonight." "Can't help you out, dude. I'm broke myself." "Maybe you should, talk to your parents." Their words were like tiny daggers, twisting in my already wounded heart. I realized, with a sickening certainty, that I had no one. My friends were just acquaintances, social connections, people who were happy to hang out with me when I had something to offer, but who vanished the moment I needed help. I ended up in a dingy, run-down motel on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where the paint was peeling, the carpets were stained, and the air smelled of stale cigarettes and despair. It was all I could afford. I sat on the edge of the lumpy bed, staring at the cracked walls, the flickering television, the bleak, impersonal surroundings. This was my life now. This was my reality. I tried to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind was a whirlwind of anxieties, of regrets, of burning anger. I replayed the conversation with my parents, their cold indifference, their blatant favoritism, their utter lack of empathy. I thought about Ethan, my golden boy brother, living the life I'd always dreamed of, supported by the money that should have been mine. I thought about my future, or rather my lack of future, my college dreams, my career aspirations, my hopes for a better life, all gone. I felt a wave of despair wash over me, so powerful, so overwhelming that I almost gave up. I almost succumbed to the darkness, to the temptation to just disappear. But then something shifted. A flicker of defiance, of anger, of something else. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them break me. I wouldn't let them define me. I was Lucas Carter, and I was not going to give up. I would survive. I would find a way. I would fight back. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but I knew this. I would not be forgotten. I would not be a victim. I would rise from the ashes, and I would make them pay. I managed a few hours of sleep before I decided I could do something productive. I wasn't going to let myself waste away in a cheap hotel. I went to the local dinner and got myself a job as a waiter. It wasn't ideal, and I wasn't too happy about it. But it was something. It got me enough money to start saving, to eat, and to have a roof over my head. I was going to need a lot more if I were to get my revenge. Weeks blurred into months. The diner job was soul-crushing, a monotonous cycle of greasy food, demanding customers, and minimum wage. But it was a lifeline, a way to survive, a way to keep going. I found a shared apartment which helped with rent, and I was careful with my money. But I hadn't forgotten. I hadn't forgiven. The anger, the betrayal, the burning desire for revenge. It was still there, simmering beneath the surface, a constant reminder of what I'd lost, of what had been taken from me. One night, after a particularly grueling shift, I found myself in a small, deserted park, a patch of green amidst the concrete jungle. I sat on a bench, exhausted, defeated, my mind filled with dark thoughts. "What's the point?" I muttered to myself, staring up at the starless sky. "I'm nothing. I'm nobody. I'll never—" I stopped, my breath catching in my throat. The air had suddenly turned cold, frigid, a bone-chilling cold that had nothing to do with the weather. I felt a presence, a sensation of being watched, a prickling on the back of my neck. I looked around, my heart pounding, but the park was empty. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. "Is anyone there?" Silence. And then I saw him. He appeared slowly, gradually, like a figure emerging from a fog. He was standing a few feet away, near a large oak tree, his form shimmering, translucent almost, unreal. He was wearing an old-fashioned suit, the kind you'd see in a black-and-white movie, a tailored, elegant suit that seemed strangely out of place in the deserted park. He had a stern face, with sharp, aristocratic features, a neatly trimmed mustache, and eyes that seemed to glow with an unnatural intensity. I stared at him, my mind reeling, my body frozen with a mixture of fear and disbelief. You're a ghost," I whispered, the words sounding ridiculous, even to my own ears. The figure smiled, a faint, melancholic smile. "Indeed, young man," he said, his voice a low, resonant murmur with a hint of an old-world accent. "And you, I believe, are Lucas Carter. How did he know my name? How was any of this possible?" Who are you?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "My name," he said, "was Reginald Blackwood, and I have been watching you, Lucas. I have seen your pain, your despair, your burning desire for justice." He explained his story, his voice filled with a lingering anger, a bitterness that resonated with my own. He'd been a wealthy, powerful businessman, a titan of industry in his time, but he'd been betrayed, murdered by his own family, his greedy, ambitious relatives who had coveted his fortune and his power. "They stole everything from me, Lucas," he said, his voice hardening. "My company, my legacy, my life. And they left my daughter Evelyn with nothing. Penniless, alone, forgotten." He looked at me, his eyes piercing, intense. "I have been searching for many years for someone with the strength, the intelligence, the motivation to help me, to help Evelyn reclaim what is rightfully hers." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "And I believe, Lucas Carter, that you are that someone." He offered me a deal, a pact, a proposition that was both insane and irresistible. He would help me, guide me, provide me with the knowledge, the resources, the power to rebuild my life, to achieve my own goals. In exchange, I would help his daughter Evelyn reclaim her inheritance, expose his murderers, and restore his legacy. "Think of it, Lucas," he said, his voice persuasive, seductive. "You have nothing to lose, and everything to gain. I can give you the means to achieve your revenge, to make your family regret the day they ever crossed you." His words struck a chord, a deep, resonant chord within me. Revenge, justice, power. It was everything I'd been craving, everything I'd been dreaming of. I hesitated, my mind struggling to process the sheer impossibility of the situation. A ghost, a pact, a chance to reclaim my life and avenge my betrayal? But I also knew this. I was at rock bottom. I had nothing left to lose. And this strange, spectral figure. He was offering me a lifeline, a chance to rise from the ashes. "What do I have to do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Reginald smiled. "It's simple, my boy," he said. You just have to be willing to play the game. And this time you'll be playing to win." He paused. "Do we have a deal?" I took a deep breath and nodded. This was my chance. "Yes," I said. "We have a deal." Reginald's instructions were precise, almost eerily so. "She lives in the Oakwood Apartments, number 2B. It's not what she deserves, but it's where she is." His voice, a constant presence in my mind now, held a mixture of sadness and simmering anger. The Oakwood Apartments were a far cry from the opulent mansions I'd imagined a Blackwood heiress inhabiting. It was a modest, unassuming building, tucked away in a quiet, residential neighborhood. A place of faded glory, of diminished expectations. I stood outside the building, my heart pounding, my hands sweating. This was it. The first step in a journey I still barely understood, a partnership with a ghost to help a woman I'd never met. I took a deep breath and pressed the buzzer for apartment 2B. A woman's voice, cool and guarded, crackled through the intercom. "Yes? Miss Blackwood? My name is Lucas Carter. I need to talk to you. It's about your father." There was a long silence. A silence that spoke volumes about her distrust, her weariness, her expectation of yet another disappointment. "Who are you?" she finally asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "I know this sounds strange," I said, choosing my words carefully, "but I have information about your father, about how he died, and about your inheritance." Another silence. Then a click, and the buzzer sounded, releasing the lock on the front door. I walked into the building, my steps echoing in the dimly lit hallway. The air smelled of stale cooking and resignation. Apartment 2B was on the second floor. The door was plain, unremarkable, with a small, tarnished brass number plate. I took another deep breath and knocked. The door opened, and I saw her. Evelyn Blackwood. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 20s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a guarded expression that seemed permanently etched on her face. She was dressed simply, in jeans and a faded t-shirt, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wasn't what I'd pictured, the spoiled heiress, the pampered socialite. She looked tired, worn down. But there was a strength there, too, a resilience that shone through the weariness, a spark that hadn't been completely extinguished. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice cool, her gaze assessing. "You said you had information about my father." "I do," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "But it's a long story, and you're probably not going to believe me." She raised an eyebrow, a hint of skepticism in her expression. "Try me," she said. "I've heard it all before. Con artists, fortune hunters, people claiming to have inside information. They all want something." "I'm not like them," I said, my voice earnest. I know this sounds crazy, but I'm in contact with your father." Her expression didn't change. She didn't laugh, didn't scoff, didn't dismiss me as a lunatic. She just stared at me, her eyes narrowed, her gaze intense. "My father is dead, Mr. Carter," she said, her voice flat. "He's been dead for 5 years." "I know," I said, "but he's here, with me. He can communicate with me." I expected her to slam the door in my face. I expected her to call the police. I expected her to laugh me off the street. But she didn't. She just kept staring at me, her expression unreadable. "You're saying you can talk to ghosts," she said, her voice flat. "I'm saying I can talk to your father," I corrected. "And he wants to help you. He wants you to reclaim what's rightfully yours." She hesitated, her gaze searching my face, looking for any sign of deception, of madness, of anything. "He's lying. He has to be. This is some kind of sick joke." Her thoughts, sharp and clear, a painful echo of her disbelief. And then Reginald's voice. In my head, urgent, insistent. Tell her about the music box, Lucas. The one I gave her on her 5th birthday. The one with the ballerina that played Claire de Lune. I took a deep breath. Your father, he says. He gave you a music box for your 5th birthday. It had a ballerina inside, and it played Claire de Lune. Evelyn's eyes widened. Her face went pale. She stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth. How could he possibly know that? Her thoughts were a whirlwind of shock, confusion, and a flicker of something else, something that might have been hope. He's here, I said, my voice softer now. He's with me. He wants to help you, Evelyn. He wants justice. She stared at me for a long moment, her eyes searching, questioning. Finally, she nodded. Come in, Mr. Carter, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Tell me. Everything. It was the beginning of a strange, unlikely partnership, the beginning of a journey to reclaim a stolen legacy, and the beginning of my entanglement with the ghost of Reginald Blackwood and his fiercely independent, deeply wounded daughter. Evelyn's apartment was small, sparsely furnished, but clean and meticulously organized. It was a reflection of her life, I realized, stripped down to the essentials, devoid of any unnecessary luxuries, a testament to her resilience and her determination to survive. We sat at her small kitchen table, the only light source a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. I told her everything, my own story, my family's betrayal, my encounter with Reginald, his offer, his guidance. She listened intently, her expression shifting from disbelief to cautious curiosity to a growing, simmering anger. So, you're saying, she said, her voice low and controlled, that my uncle Victor not only stole my inheritance but also murdered my father? That's what Reginald believes, I replied. And I'm starting to believe it too. With Reginald's help, I'd started digging into Victor Blackwood's business dealings. He was, by all outward appearances, a successful, respected businessman, the CEO of Blackwood Industries, the company Reginald had founded. But beneath the surface, there was a rot, a corruption that was slowly eating away at the company's foundations. I showed Evelyn the documents I'd managed to access, with Reginald guiding me to hidden files, forgotten accounts, and encrypted messages. We spent hours poring over financial statements, legal contracts, and internal memos, piecing together the puzzle of Victor's treachery. He's been systematically stripping the company of its assets, I explained, pointing to a series of suspicious transactions. Transferring money to offshore accounts, laundering funds through shell corporations, siphoning off profits. Just like his father, I hear Reginald's voice say in my head. Evelyn's face was pale, her hands clenched into fists. He's been living off my father's money, she said, her voice trembling with rage. He's been stealing from me, from my family, for years. It's worse than that, Evelyn, I said, my voice grim. He didn't just steal your inheritance. He destroyed your father's reputation. He made it look like Reginald was incompetent, reckless, that he'd driven the company into the ground. We found evidence of fabricated reports, forged documents, and planted rumors, all designed to discredit Reginald and pave the way for Victor's takeover. Evelyn was slowly beginning to see the light, to see what had truly happened, and to see that I wasn't crazy. She was quiet, reserved, but slowly, as we started to piece things together, she began to open up. We would spend hours just planning and scheming. I can't believe he would do this to me. All along he made me feel like I was crazy for suspecting. I can't believe I let him manipulate me. Evelyn thought. I looked at her and nodded. She was seeing clearly for the first time in a long time. The final piece of the puzzle came in the form of an old, leather-bound journal hidden in a secret compartment in Reginald's former office at Blackwood Industries. Accessing the office had been a challenge, of course, but with Reginald's guidance and my unique ability, I'd managed it. The journal contained Reginald's private thoughts, his suspicions, his growing fears about Victor's actions, and crucially, it contained a reference to a specific meeting, a meeting that had taken place just days before Reginald's death. "He's planning something, Evelyn," I said, reading the entry aloud. "Something big, something dangerous. I don't trust him. I need to—" The entry ended there, abruptly, as if Reginald had been interrupted. "That's it," Evelyn said, her eyes wide. "That's the proof. That's the evidence we need to expose him." "Not yet," I said, shaking my head. "We need more. We need something concrete, something irrefutable, something that will not only destroy Victor, but also clear your father's name." But we were close. So close, we had the motive, the means, and the opportunity. We just needed the final piece of the puzzle, the smoking gun that would prove Victor's guilt beyond any doubt. And I had a feeling we were about to find it. Armed with the evidence from Reginald's journal and my insights, Evelyn and I began to build our case. It was like assembling a complex jigsaw puzzle, each piece a fragment of information, a document, a witness, a clue. We needed to create a picture of Victor's corruption that was so clear, so irrefutable, that it would shatter his carefully constructed facade and expose him for the criminal he was. Evelyn, despite her initial skepticism, was now a fierce ally. The fire of injustice, of righteous anger, burned in her eyes. She had a personal stake in this, a legacy to reclaim, a father's name to clear. And, I suspected, a growing trust in me, in my strange connection to her deceased father. He's really helping me," she thought, during one of our late-night strategy sessions. "He's not like the others. He's different." Reginald, ever present, guided us, whispering advice, pointing out hidden connections, revealing secrets that only he could know. He was our unseen partner, our ghostly advisor, our link to the past. We started by gathering legal and financial documentation. We needed proof of Victor's embezzlement, his fraud, his manipulation of the company's assets. It was a tedious, painstaking process, sifting through mountains of paperwork, deciphering complex financial transactions, following the trail of money. Evelyn's knowledge of the company, her insider's perspective, was invaluable. She knew where to look, who to talk to, what questions to ask. My ability helped us navigate the treacherous waters of corporate espionage, anticipating Victor's moves, identifying his allies, uncovering his hidden agendas. We sought out allies within Blackwood Industries, employees who had been wronged by Victor, who had witnessed his corruption, who were willing to speak out, to testify, to help us bring him down. It was a risky endeavor. Victor had eyes and ears everywhere. He was a powerful, ruthless man, and he wouldn't hesitate to silence anyone who threatened him. We faced resistance, intimidation, even threats. One of our key witnesses, a former accountant who had evidence of Victor's illegal offshore accounts, mysteriously resigned from the company and disappeared. Another, a former executive who had been fired by Victor, received a threatening phone call, warning him to stay silent. "He's getting nervous," Reginald whispered, his voice a cold presence in my mind. "He knows we're closing in. He's becoming desperate." One evening, we were working late in Evelyn's apartment, poring over a stack of financial documents, when the lights suddenly went out. The room plunged into darkness. "What the—" Evelyn exclaimed, her voice laced with alarm. I felt a sudden chill, a prickling on the back of my neck. It wasn't just the darkness, it was Something else, a presence, a threat. "He's here, Lucas," Reginald whispered urgently. "He's trying to scare us, to stop us." I reached out, my hand finding Evelyn's in the darkness. "Stay calm," I said, my voice low and steady. "Don't make a sound." We heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, approaching the apartment door. Someone was trying the handle, jiggling it, testing it. "He's going to try to break in," Reginald said. "He thinks we have the evidence here." I knew, from my past, that Victor had a contingency plan, a cleaner, a man he used to intimidate witnesses, to silence dissent, to eliminate problems. I had to act fast. I focused my mind, channeling Reginald's knowledge, his memories, his instincts. "The fire escape," I whispered to Evelyn. "Go, now!" I pushed her towards the window, towards the rusty fire escape that led down to the alley below. She hesitated, her eyes wide with fear. "Trust me," I said, my voice firm. "Go!" As Evelyn climbed out the window, I grabbed a heavy lamp from the table, my only weapon. I stood in the shadows, waiting, listening, my heart pounding in my chest. The door burst open, and a figure lunged into the room, a dark silhouette against the faint light from the hallway. "Where is she?" the figure growled, his voice rough, menacing. I didn't answer, I just waited, my grip tightening on the lamp, my senses on high alert. He took a step closer, his eyes scanning the room, searching for me. And then I struck. I swung the lamp with all my might, connecting with the side of his head. He staggered, groaning, and collapsed to the floor. I didn't wait to see if he was unconscious. I ran out the door, down the hallway, towards the fire escape, towards Evelyn. We escaped, disappearing into the night, leaving Victor's henchmen behind, our pursuer thwarted, our secret safe. For now. The incident solidified Evelyn's trust in me. She'd seen firsthand the power of Reginald's guidance, the effectiveness of my ability. She no longer doubted me. She no longer questioned my motives. She saw me as her protector, her ally, her friend. But I had my own family on my mind. I started to consider contacting my family. It was time for the final stage of the plan. Victor was cornered. He knew we were closing in, that his empire was on the verge of collapse. He was becoming increasingly desperate, increasingly reckless. And that made him predictable. We knew he wouldn't go down without a fight. He would try to strike back, to discredit us, to silence us, to eliminate us. But we were ready for him. We'd anticipated his every move, prepared for his every attack. We were playing a game of chess, and we were always several moves ahead. Evelyn, with my, and Reginald's, guidance, had been quietly gathering support within the company, reaching out to disgruntled employees, former executives, anyone who had a grievance against Victor. She'd presented them with the evidence we'd uncovered, the proof of his corruption, his fraud, his abuse of power. She'd offered them a chance to join us, to help us bring him down, to reclaim the company that was rightfully theirs. And many of them had accepted. They were tired of living in fear, of being bullied, of being exploited. They were ready for change. They were ready for justice. We planned our attack carefully, meticulously. We would expose Victor publicly, at a board meeting, presenting the evidence to the directors, to the shareholders, to the media. It was a risky move, a gamble. But we had no other choice. We had to strike now before Victor could regroup, before he could silence us, before he could escape. The day of the board meeting arrived. The atmosphere in the room was tense, charged with anticipation. Victor was there, of course, his face a mask of arrogance and defiance. He still believed he was in control, that he could somehow weasel his way out of this. He was wrong. Evelyn stood up, her voice calm and steady, and addressed the board. She outlined Victor's crimes, his mismanagement, his betrayal of the company, of its employees, of its shareholders. She presented the evidence, piece by piece, building a case that was irrefutable, damning. Victor tried to interrupt, to deny, to deflect. But it was useless. The board members, many of whom I'd subtly influenced over the past few months, were no longer swayed by his lies, his charm, his threats. They listened to Evelyn, they examined the evidence, and they made their decision. Victor Blackwood, the chairman of the board said, his voice grave, "You are hereby removed from your position as CEO of Blackwood Industries, effective immediately." Victor's face went white, his eyes wide with disbelief, with rage, with a flicker of fear. He'd lost. He'd been defeated. "This isn't over!" he shouted, his voice desperate. I'll sue you! I'll ruin you all!" But his threats were empty, hollow. He had no power, no leverage, no allies. He was finished. And as the security guards escorted him from the boardroom, his head held low, his shoulders slumped in defeat, I felt a surge of satisfaction. It wasn't just revenge, it was justice. Evelyn turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something else, something deeper. "We did it, Lucas," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We actually did it?" "We did," I replied, smiling. And for the first time in a long time, the smile felt genuine. But was it? I still had a family who abandoned me, and I wanted them to know I was doing great. The aftermath of Victor's downfall was a whirlwind of activity. Lawyers, accountants, and investigators swarmed Blackwood Industries, untangling the web of deceit and corruption that Victor had spun. The media, initially captivated by the scandal, now celebrated Evelyn's triumph, her courage, her resilience. Evelyn, thrust into the role of CEO, handled the transition with a grace and determination that surprised even me. She was a natural leader, decisive, compassionate, and fiercely committed to restoring her father's legacy. She implemented sweeping changes, cleaning house, firing Victor's cronies, and rebuilding the company on a foundation of honesty and integrity. "She's remarkable," I thought, watching her address a room full of employees, her voice ringing with confidence and authority. She's everything her father wanted her to be. And Reginald. He was still there, a constant presence, a silent observer. But he was different. The anger, the bitterness, the burning desire for revenge, it had faded, replaced by a quiet contentment, a sense of peace. One evening, as Evelyn and I were celebrating our victory with a quiet dinner in her apartment, now significantly upgraded thanks to her reclaimed inheritance, Reginald appeared. He was standing in the corner of the room, his form shimmering, translucent, but weaker somehow, fading. "Evelyn," he said, his voice a soft whisper, barely audible. "Lucas." We both turned, startled, but not afraid. We'd grown accustomed to his presence, to his spectral guidance. "Father?" Evelyn said, her voice trembling slightly. He smiled, a faint, melancholic smile. "You did it, my dear," he said. "You reclaimed your birthright, you restored my honor, you made me proud." His gaze shifted to me. "And you, Lucas," he said. "You were the instrument of my justice. You were. More than I could have ever hoped for." He paused, his form flickering, as if struggling to maintain its cohesion. "I have one final gift for you, Lucas," he said. "A token of my gratitude, a reward for your loyalty, your courage, your friendship." He told me about a safety deposit box, hidden in an old bank downtown, a bank that had been in his family for generations. He gave me the number, the key, the instructions. "It's yours, Lucas," he said. "Use it wisely. Build a life for yourself, a life worthy of the trust I placed in you." And then he turned back to Evelyn, his eyes filled with a love that transcended death, that transcended the boundaries of the physical world. "My daughter," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "I am so proud of you. So very proud." Evelyn rushed to him, her arms outstretched, as if to embrace him. But her hands passed through his spectral form, finding nothing but air. Tears streamed down her face, tears of grief, of joy, of closure. "I love you, Father," she whispered. I always have." Reginald smiled, a radiant, blissful smile, and then slowly, gradually he faded away. His form shimmered, flickered, and then vanished. He was gone. Evelyn and I stood there, in the silence of the apartment, the air still heavy with the echoes of his presence. We were both crying, tears of loss, of relief, of gratitude. "He's at peace now," I said, my voice hoarse. "He's finally free." Evelyn nodded, wiping her tears. "Thank you, Lucas," she said, "for everything, for bringing him back to me, for giving me closure, for being here." We looked at each other, our eyes meeting, holding. There was a connection between us, a bond forged in the crucible of adversity, of shared struggle, of something more. "What now?" she asked, her voice soft. "Now," I said, "we build a future. Together." I could see in her eyes that this was what she wanted. The bank was old, imposing, a relic of a bygone era. It felt like stepping back in time into Reginald's world, a world of mahogany paneling, marble floors, and hushed reverence for wealth. I presented the key and the instructions to a stern-faced bank manager who led me to a private vault, a room filled with rows of steel boxes, each one holding secrets, treasures, the legacies of generations. The manager unlocked the box, number 77, and pulled it out. It was heavy, heavier than I expected. He left me alone, closing the vault door behind him, leaving me in silence, in anticipation, in awe. I opened the box. The contents were staggering. Gold bars, gleaming in the dim light, their weight substantial, their value immense. Bundles of old stocks, certificates from companies that had long since merged, been acquired, become giants of industry. And at the bottom of the box, a letter. A handwritten letter, in Reginald's elegant script. I unfolded the letter, my hands trembling, and began to read. "My dear Lucas, if you are reading this, then my plan has succeeded. My daughter is safe, my legacy is restored, and you have proven yourself worthy. I did not choose you at random, Lucas. I saw in you a kindred spirit, a man betrayed, abandoned, forgotten. I saw your pain, your anger, your potential. But I also saw something more. I saw your integrity, your courage, your compassion. I saw a man who was capable of great things, a man who deserved a second chance. This wealth is not just a reward, Lucas. It is a responsibility. It is a tool. Use it wisely. Use it to build a better future. For yourself, for Evelyn, for the world. Do not let vengeance consume you. Do not let the darkness define you. Let go of the past. Embrace the future. And remember, true wealth lies not in possessions, but in the love you share, the bonds you forge, the good you do. Thank you, Lucas, for everything. Reginald Blackwood." I sat there, in the silence of the vault, the weight of the gold, the power of the stocks, the wisdom of Reginald's words. It was overwhelming. I was no longer Lucas Carter, the forgotten son, the outcast, the failure. I was something more, something powerful. I closed the box, my mind racing, my heart pounding. I had a future now, a future I could build, a future I could control. I had a choice to make. And I knew what I wanted to do. I left the bank, a new man, a man reborn. I had money, I had options, I had freedom. The first thing I did was call my parents. They were shocked to hear from me, of course. They'd assumed I was gone, lost, forgotten. "Lucas, is that really you?" my mother asked, her voice hesitant, disbelieving. "It's me, Mom," I said, my voice cold, devoid of any emotion. "I just wanted to let you know. I'm doing well. Very well, in fact." I told them briefly about my success, about my new business venture, about my wealth. I didn't mention Reginald, of course, or Evelyn, or the revenge. I just let them hear the triumph in my voice, the confidence, the power. We're so happy for you, Lucas," my father stammered, his voice filled with a mixture of confusion and envy. "We always knew you'd make something of yourself." "Did you?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because I seem to recall you kicking me out of the house, telling me to figure it out on my own." There was a long silence. "Lucas, we made a mistake," my mother said, her voice trembling. "We were wrong. We want to see you. We want to make amends." "Make amends," I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "It's a little late for that, don't you think?" "Please, Lucas," my father pleaded. "We're your family. We love you." "You have a funny way of showing it," I said, my voice cold. "Goodbye, Mother. Goodbye, Father." I hung up the phone, severing the final tie to my past, to the family that had betrayed me, abandoned me, forgotten me. It was a harsh act, a cruel act, perhaps, but it was also necessary. I couldn't move forward. I couldn't build a new life if I was still clinging to the wreckage of the old one. I was free now, free from their judgment, their expectations, their indifference. I used my newfound wealth to build a new life. I invested wisely. I supported Evelyn's efforts to rebuild Blackwood Industries, and I started my own company, an engineering firm dedicated to sustainable design, to creating innovative solutions for a better future. It was my dream, my passion, the life I'd always wanted. And now, I had the resources, the freedom to make it a reality. I was no longer the forgotten son. I was Lucas Carter, a man reborn, a man who had faced betrayal, despair, and the supernatural, and emerged stronger, wealthier, and wiser. And most importantly, I was no longer alone. I had Evelyn. We had each other. And together we were building a future, a legacy that was far greater than anything either of us could have imagined.